Most people lose the battle before a single word is spoken. Not because they're weak, not because they're wrong, but because the moment someone tries to intimidate them, they unknowingly accept the role of the weaker person in the interaction. Think about that for a second. What if the greatest advantage an intimidator has over you isn't their confidence, their status, or even their aggression? What if it's your reaction? Hey warriors, here's a truth most people never realize. Intimidation only works when you participate in it. The loud voice, the hard stare, the aggressive posture, the subtle threats. None of these are real power by themselves. They're psychological tools designed to trigger something inside you. Fear, urgency, self-doubt, the need to explain yourself, the need to prove yourself. And the moment you start reacting emotionally, the game is already being played on their terms. That's what makes intimidation so dangerous. It rarely looks like an attack. It looks like pressure. Pressure to answer quickly. Pressure to defend yourself. Pressure to justify your decisions. Pressure to shrink so someone else can feel bigger. And here's the strange part. The people who intimidate others often expect the same predictable response every single time. They expect nervousness. They expect compliance. They expect emotional movement. But what happens when they don't get it? What happens when the person standing in front of them refuses to follow the script? Picture the scene. Someone is trying to dominate the conversation. Their tone sharpens. Their presence expands. They step closer. They speak with certainty. They want you to feel rushed. They want you to feel small. Most people immediately start talking faster. They over-explain. They defend themselves before they've even been accused of anything. And without realizing it, they hand over control, because intimidation feeds on reaction. The more emotional energy you give it, the stronger it becomes. The more you try to fight it emotionally, the deeper you fall into its frame. But imagine doing the opposite. Imagine remaining still when they expect movement, calm when they expect anxiety, measured when they expect panic. No defensive rambling, no desperate explanations. No need to prove your worth, just quiet certainty. And suddenly something fascinating happens. The pressure they've been creating has nowhere to land. Their rhythm begins to break. Their confidence starts searching for resistance and finds none. For the first time, they're forced to confront uncertainty. And that's the moment the balance of power starts to shift. Not through aggression, not through confrontation, but through psychological mastery. Today, I'm going to show you 7 Machiavellian psychological tactics that can completely change the way you handle people who try to intimidate, manipulate, or overpower you. These aren't tactics for becoming louder. They aren't tactics for becoming cruel. And they certainly aren't about winning arguments. They're about controlling the invisible battlefield most people don't even realize they're standing on. Timing, presence, emotional discipline, strategic silence, mental positioning. The subtle psychological moves that make intimidating people question themselves while you remain completely composed. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some individuals can walk into the most tense situations imaginable and remain untouchable. Not because they're physically stronger, but because they've learned a secret that intimidators desperately hope you never discover. And once you see it, you'll never look at power the same way again. Number 1, freeze the stage. Most men don't lose to intimidation because they're weak. They lose because they unknowingly agree to play the role that was assigned to them. That's the hidden truth. Every intimidation attempt is a performance. There's always a stage, always an audience, even if it's invisible. And most importantly, there's a script. The aggressor already knows the reaction they're looking for before they ever open their mouth. The defensive explanation, the nervous smile, the rushed justification, the emotional outburst, the desperate attempt to prove something. And here's what most men never realize. The moment you give them that reaction, you've already accepted their frame. You've stepped onto their stage. Think about the last time someone tried to pressure you. Maybe it was a boss speaking down to you in front of others. Maybe it was another man testing you in a social setting. Maybe it was a woman suddenly becoming cold, distant, trying to provoke an emotional response. What happened inside your body? Your heart sped up. Your thoughts started racing. You searched for the perfect response. You wanted to fix the tension immediately. That's the trap. Pressure creates urgency. Urgency creates mistakes. And mistakes create submission. The average man cannot tolerate silence. He cannot tolerate uncertainty. He feels an overwhelming need to fill the gap, to explain, to defend, to react. That's why intimidation works on him. Not because the other person is powerful, because he cannot control himself. The first move is simple. Freeze the stage. When pressure arrives, do nothing. Not forever. Just long enough to break the rhythm. Let the silence sit there. Let it become uncomfortable. Most people have never experienced genuine calm resistance. They are prepared for conflict. They are prepared for arguments. They are prepared for arguments. They are prepared for emotional reactions. They are completely unprepared for stillness. And that's where the shift begins. Imagine a man aggressively questioning you in a meeting. His voice gets louder. His energy becomes sharper. Everyone in the room expects you to defend yourself immediately. Instead, you sit back. You breathe. You look at him calmly. And you say nothing for 3 seconds, maybe 4. Suddenly something strange happens. The pressure that was aimed at you has nowhere to land. Now he's standing alone with his own aggression. Now everyone can see it. Now he's the one becoming exposed. Because performers need feedback. Without feedback, performers become self-conscious. His mind starts asking dangerous questions. Am I overdoing this? Why isn't he reacting? Do I look emotional? Am I losing control? Notice what happened. You didn't attack him. You didn't dominate him. You simply refused to feed the machine. That's why silence is so powerful. Not because it's passive, because it forces the other person to confront themselves. And most people hate confronting themselves. Your body language matters here. No smirking. No eye rolling. No fake alpha theatrics. Those are reactions too. Remain neutral. Grounded. Unreadable. Like a judge listening to testimony. The strongest men in the room are rarely the most expressive. They're usually the hardest to read. Their emotions aren't absent, they're contained. And containment creates mystery. Mystery creates uncertainty. Uncertainty destroys intimidation. Pay attention to your micro movements as well. The tapping foot, the restless hands, the constant adjusting of your clothes. These tiny signals betray the battle happening inside you. Control the movement. Control the message. Because people rarely judge your internal state. They judge what they can see. And visible control is often mistaken for real power. Maybe that's unfair. But that's reality. Remember this. Most intimidation attempts are fishing expeditions. They're throwing pressure into the water and waiting for emotional movement. The moment you stop moving, they stop getting information. And when they stop getting information, they lose control. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. The man who controls the tempo controls the interaction. And the man who refuses to react often becomes the man nobody can control. Number 2. Make them reveal themselves. Most men make the same mistake when someone tries to intimidate them. They defend immediately, almost instinctively. The accusation comes flying across the table, and before they've even processed what was said, they're already explaining, justifying, proving, arguing. Why? Because pressure creates panic, and panic creates compliance. The intimidator understands something most people don't. The man who is defending himself is not controlling the conversation. He's trapped inside it. That's why your goal is never to defend first. Your goal is to make them reveal. Here's a brutal truth about human nature. Most people sound strongest at the beginning of their attack. Not because they're right, because they're vague. Think about it. You always mess things up. Everyone knows you're not capable. This is a terrible decision. You clearly don't understand what you're doing. Notice the pattern. Heavy words, absolute certainty, maximum emotional impact, minimum actual substance. And yet, most men hear statements like these and immediately feel the need to fight back. That's exactly what the other person wants. Because while you're busy defending yourself, nobody is examining them. Nobody is examining the claim. Nobody is asking for evidence. Nobody is forcing clarity. The spotlight stays exactly where they want it, on you. Your move is simple: turn the spotlight around. Not with aggression, not with sarcasm, but with curiosity. Cold, controlled curiosity. The kind that makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to expose what's actually underneath their confidence. The next time someone says, "Everyone knows you can't handle this," don't rush to argue. Pause. Then ask, who specifically is everyone? Watch what happens. The next time someone says, "This is a terrible decision," ask, what specifically makes it terrible? Then stay silent. Most people have never prepared for that moment. They prepared for resistance. They prepared for emotion. They prepared for a fight. They did not prepare for examination. And examination is where weak arguments go to die. I once watched a senior executive publicly challenge a younger manager during a meeting. The attack sounded devastating, confident, sharp, authoritative. For a moment, everyone in the room assumed the younger man was finished. Then he asked a single question: "Which part of the proposal concerns you most?" The room went quiet. Suddenly the executive wasn't attacking anymore. Now he had to explain. And something fascinating happened. The certainty started fading, the details became messy, the logic became inconsistent. The emotional force that seemed so powerful 30 seconds earlier began leaking out with every sentence. By the end of the exchange, nobody remembered the accusation. They remembered the weakness hiding underneath it. This is the psychological trap most intimidators never expect. The moment they are forced to explain themselves, they begin spending energy, mental energy, social energy, status energy. They're no longer throwing punches, now they're carrying weight. And carrying weight is exhausting. That's why your questions should be surgical. Not emotional, not rambling, not defensive, but short, precise, dangerously calm. What exactly do you mean by that? What evidence supports that conclusion? Walk me through your reasoning. Every question is another light switched on inside a dark room, and intimidation survives best in the dark. The darker the room, the bigger the shadows appear, the more light you create, the smaller the monster becomes. Here's something even more powerful. People reveal themselves when they talk long enough. The contradictions emerge, the exaggerations surface, the emotional motives become visible, but only if you let them keep talking. Most men are too impatient. The moment they spot an inconsistency, they jump in. Don't. Stay quiet, let them continue. Silence is often the rope people use to unravel themselves. Remember this principle. Pressure wants obedience, questions demand accountability. And the moment pressure is forced to explain itself, it starts shrinking. Because intimidation sounds powerful from a distance, but up close, under examination, it is often nothing more than confidence hiding a lack of substance. Number 3. Speak slowly. Move slowly. Most men don't realize this, but the moment they feel pressure, they start speeding up. Not just their speech, everything. Their thoughts, their breathing, their movements, their decisions. It's almost automatic. Someone challenges them, disrespects them, questions their competence, and suddenly they're talking twice as fast as normal, trying to explain themselves before the other person can attack again. Maybe you've done it. A boss puts you on the spot during a meeting. A woman sends a cold message that catches you off guard. Another man tests you in front of a group, and before you even realize what's happening, you're rushing. Rushing to answer, rushing to defend, rushing to regain control. But here's the part nobody tells you. The moment you rush, you've already surrendered the frame. Because urgency is rarely a sign of power. Urgency is usually a sign of pressure, and pressure is exactly what intimidators want you to feel. Watch people carefully. The The person trying to dominate a situation almost always wants speed. They want immediate answers, immediate reactions, immediate compliance. Why? Because speed leaves no room for thought, no room for analysis, no room for emotional control. A rushed man is easier to manipulate than a calm one. That's why one of the most dangerous things you can do is slow everything down. Not dramatically, not theatrically, almost imperceptibly. Imagine someone throws a loaded accusation at you. Most people respond before the sentence has even finished landing. But the man who understands power does something different. He lets the words arrive. He lets the silence breathe, then he responds. Not because he's trying to look strong, because he refuses to be rushed. That distinction changes everything. I once watched a negotiation between two businessmen. One was talking nonstop, fast, aggressive, constant pressure. The other barely moved. When he spoke, it was measured, almost annoyingly calm. Every answer seemed delayed by a second or two. At first glance, he looked passive. But by the end of the conversation, everyone in the room was following his pace. Think about that. The slower man controlled the faster man because tempo is contagious. Most people think control comes from speaking more. The truth is often the opposite. Control comes from deciding the speed at which reality unfolds. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Many men cannot slow down because slowing down forces them to feel their own anxiety. The rapid speech, the constant explaining, the nervous jokes, the endless talking. Most of it isn't communication. It's emotional leakage. It's tension looking for an escape route. That's why the man who can remain measured instantly feels different, not because he's fearless, because he's disciplined. Your breathing matters here more than your words. When pressure arrives, most men start breathing high in their chest, short, shallow, fast. Their nervous system enters survival mode, and survival mode makes people predictable. Instead, breathe lower, slower. Let your voice ride on the exhale. You don't need a deep movie trailer voice. Luder. You don't need a deep movie trailer voice. A voice that sounds like it has nowhere to be. Because a man who appears unrushed creates a strange psychological effect. People assume he has options. People assume he has confidence. People assume he isn't afraid of consequences. Whether that's true or not almost doesn't matter. Perception becomes reality. Your movements should follow the same principle. Watch powerful men closely. They're rarely the busiest people in the room. They don't point constantly. They don't fidget. They don't adjust their clothes every 10 seconds. Their movements have intention. One gesture instead of 10. One glance instead of 5. One posture adjustment instead of endless restless motion. Economy creates authority. Excess movement creates doubt. Remember this. Pressure always wants acceleration. Authority chooses the pace. The man who controls the tempo often controls the interaction, because while everyone else is reacting to the storm, he's doing something far more dangerous. He's changing the weather. Number 4. Control the space. Most men think intimidation starts with words. It doesn't. By the time the words arrive, the real battle has often already begun at a level most people never notice. Distance, positioning, territory, space, the silent language of dominance. Watch closely the next time someone tries to pressure another person. Before they raise their voice, before they make their point, before they challenge anything directly, they often start moving. A step closer, a slight lean forward, an invasion of personal space disguised as confidence. And what does the average man do? He retreats. Not dramatically, just a few inches. A tiny step backward, a shift away, a subtle turn of the shoulders. Nothing obvious, yet everything has changed. Because power transfers happen in inches long before they happen in words. Most men don't even realize they're surrendering ground. Their body does it automatically. The discomfort arrives, the nervous system reacts, the feet obey. And the moment the feet obey, the mind often follows. Think back to a moment when someone made you uncomfortable. Maybe it was a dominant personality at work. Maybe it was a confrontation in public. Maybe it was a man testing your confidence in front of a woman. Maybe it was the woman herself, cold, detached. suddenly pulling away emotionally while watching your reaction. Notice what happened. Your body wanted relief, not victory, relief. And relief usually comes through retreat. That's the hidden mechanism. Most intimidation succeeds because people become addicted to escaping discomfort. The stronger man isn't necessarily the man with less fear. He's the man who doesn't move because of it. That's why controlling space matters. Not because space is physical, because space is psychological. Your body is constantly broadcasting information about your internal state, whether you intend it to or not. Start with your feet. Simple, boring, powerful. Plant them naturally, shoulder width apart, balanced, not stiff, not military, just grounded. A stable base creates a stable presence, and a stable presence changes how pressure feels inside your nervous system. Now here's where things get interesting. When someone enters your personal space, your instinct will be to create distance. Fight that instinct, not aggressively, not theatrically. Just don't obey it immediately. Hold your position. For 1 second, maybe 2, you'd be amazed how often the other person becomes uncomfortable first. Because most dominance displays rely on automatic compliance. When compliance doesn't arrive, uncertainty enters the room, and uncertainty is poison to intimidation. I once watched 2 men during a business negotiation. One kept leaning forward aggressively across the table, invading space, projecting pressure. The other barely moved. No challenge. No aggression, no retreat, just presence. No retreat, just presence. After 20 minutes, something strange happened. The aggressive man slowly started leaning back. His energy began collapsing into itself. Nobody told him to do it. The dynamic simply reversed, because pressure without movement eventually exhausts itself. This is why your posture matters. Keep your chest open, not puffed out, not exaggerated, open. Present, available. A closed posture signals self-protection. An open posture signals self-possession. And there is a difference. Self-protection says, I hope this doesn't get worse. Self-possession says, I can handle whatever happens next. People feel that difference instantly, even when they can't explain it. Your eyes matter too, not the fake alpha stare so many men force. That's insecurity disguised as confidence. Real composure looks different. Steady eye contact, natural breaks, no darting around the room, no searching for exits. Your eyes should communicate one message. I am here, and I am not leaving my position because of your pressure. Remember this. Intimidation is often nothing more than an attempt to make you psychologically relocate yourself, to abandon your center, to surrender your frame, to step out of your own territory and into theirs. Don't. Stay where you are, calmly, silently, without drama, because men who hold their ground physically tend to hold their ground mentally, and men who hold their ground mentally become very difficult to control. Number 5. Strategic indifference. This is the tactic most men misunderstand, because from the outside, it looks like you don't care. But that's not what's happening. You care. You simply refuse to be controlled by what you care about. And that distinction changes everything. Most manipulation doesn't happen through force. It happens through emotional hooks, tiny psychological traps designed to pull you into a reaction. A disrespectful comment, a sarcastic remark, a public challenge, a cold text message, a subtle comparison to another man, a deliberate attempt to make you feel overlooked, rejected, disrespected, inadequate. The average man thinks the battle starts after the hook lands. The truth, the battle is the hook, the reaction is the victory. Think about how many times you've lost your frame without realizing it. A woman suddenly becomes distant. You immediately start wondering what changed. You replay conversations, you analyze messages, you check your phone more often. You start investing emotional energy into solving a problem that may not even exist. Meanwhile, she occupies space in your mind without lifting a finger, or maybe another man makes a subtle jab in front of a group. Not enough to justify confrontation, just enough to test your emotional stability. And now you're thinking about it hours later, replaying the moment, imagining what you should have said, trying to recover a status loss that mostly exists inside your own head. Notice the pattern. The real battlefield was never external, it was psychological occupation. Someone successfully rented space inside your mind, and the rent was paid with your attention. That's why strategic indifference is so powerful, because attention is currency, and most people spend it recklessly. The man who cannot control where his attention goes eventually loses control of himself. The cold truth is that many people aren't trying to defeat you, they're trying to consume your focus. Because focus is power, energy is power, attention is power. And whatever controls those things controls part of your life. This is why strong men learn a skill that almost nobody talks about: the ability to emotionally downgrade people. Not out of arrogance, out of discernment. The moment you recognize a provocation, stop treating it like an emergency, label it mentally. That's bait, that's insecurity, that's posturing, that's attention-seeking, that's emotional fishing. The simple act of labeling creates distance, and distance creates freedom. Without that gap, emotion takes over. With that gap, you regain choice. I once knew a man who could walk into any room and remain completely unaffected by social pressure. At first, people assumed he was naturally confident. Later, I realized something different. He simply wasn't available for manipulation. When people tried to provoke him, nothing happened. When people withheld approval, nothing happened. When people challenged him emotionally, nothing happened. Not because he was emotionless, because he was selective. Most men give emotional access to everyone. He gave emotional access to almost no one. That is leverage. Your face matters here. Your voice matters here. No forced smiles. No nervous laughter. No visible irritation. No desperate attempts to prove your value. The strongest response is often a calm acknowledgement. I hear you. That's your opinion. Noted. Then move on. No emotional investment, no fuel, no performance. Because here's what intimidators, manipulators, and attention seekers secretly depend on: your participation. Without your emotional participation, their influence begins collapsing. Their pressure has nowhere to attach itself. Their hooks find no skin. Their fire finds no oxygen. Remember this principle. Not everything deserves your reaction. Not everything deserves your attention. Not everything deserves access to your mind. The man who learns to withdraw emotional investment strategically becomes incredibly difficult to control, because what you refuse to emotionally sponsor can no longer psychologically own you. Number 6. Agree without losing. This is one of the most dangerous psychological moves in the entire video, because almost nobody sees it happening. Most men believe every challenge presents only two options: fight or surrender. Push back or get pushed around. Win or lose. And that's exactly why they get trapped, because the person applying pressure wants you to think those are the only choices available. The moment you accept that frame, you've already entered their game. But powerful men understand something different. There is a third option, one that feels almost unfair when you know how to use it. Agree, without giving up an inch. At first, this sounds contradictory. How can you agree and still maintain control? Simple. You stop treating acknowledgement and submission as the same thing, because they aren't. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes insecure men make is believing they must oppose everything to appear strong. They think disagreement creates dominance. Often, it creates the opposite. It reveals emotional dependence. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who argues with everything? Every opinion, every suggestion, every criticism, every perspective. After a while, you stop seeing confidence. You start seeing fragility. Because people who are truly secure don't panic when another viewpoint enters the room. Only threatened people do. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Many intimidation attempts are secretly powered by your ego, not theirs. Yours. The need to immediately prove you're right. The need to defend your image. The need to defend your image. The need to show nobody can challenge you. That impulse feels strong, but it usually hands the other person control, because now they're steering your emotions. A man who can make you react owns part of your behavior. A man who can predict your reaction owns even more. That's why calibrated agreement is so powerful. Imagine someone says, "You're making a mistake." Most men instantly argue, "No, I'm not. You're wrong. You don't understand." And now a battle begins. Instead, imagine responding like this: "That's possible. I can see why you'd think that." Pause. Then continue. "That said, I'm still moving forward." Notice what just happened. You acknowledged reality without surrendering authority. You absorbed the pressure, then redirected it. No fight, no retreat, no emotional leakage, just control. I once watched a senior executive handle a hostile boardroom challenge this way. A colleague openly questioned his strategy in front of everyone. The room expected conflict. Instead, he nodded and said, "That's a fair concern." Then he paused. No defensiveness, no tension. No need to protect his ego. Then he added, "And after considering that risk, I still believe this is the strongest option." That was it. The conversation instantly changed, because he refused the invitation to fight. And without a fight, the challenger had nowhere to generate momentum. This is what most men fail to understand. Many people gain power through friction. They need resistance. They need opposition. They need emotional collision. Remove the collision, and suddenly their engine starts stalling. The interaction loses its drama, and drama is often where intimidation hides. The key is precision. Don't validate everything. Don't over-explain. Don't become agreeable. That's weakness disguised as diplomacy. Instead, acknowledge only what is true, the smallest valid piece, a concern, a perspective, an observation. Then calmly return to your position, short, clear, unmoved. "I understand your point. My decision remains the same. I hear your concern. I'm still proceeding." Confidence is not the need to defeat every opinion. Confidence is allowing another viewpoint to exist without feeling threatened by it. That's a level of emotional control most people never reach. Remember this. Acknowledgement is not surrender. Understanding is not obedience. And agreement with a fragment is not submission to the whole. The strongest men in the room rarely waste energy proving they're strong. They simply remain impossible to move. Number 7. Leave calmly. Win silently. Most men think power is proven in the confrontation. They're wrong. Power is usually revealed in the exit. In fact, if you pay attention, you'll notice something uncomfortable. Many men can hold their frame for 5 minutes. Very few can hold it for the final 30 seconds. That's where they break. That's where the emotional leakage begins. The argument is over. The decision has been made. The point has been delivered. Yet they keep talking, explaining, defending, trying to secure one last validation, one last victory, one last acknowledgement. And in that desperate search for closure, they give away everything they spent the last 10 minutes building. Think about the last conflict you replayed in your mind. A disagreement, a breakup, a confrontation at work. What do you remember most vividly? Usually not the middle, usually the ending. The final words, the final look, the final action. Human beings are wired this way. The ending becomes the memory. The ending becomes the story. And the story becomes the truth people carry forward. That's why intelligent intimidators almost never stop when they should. They understand something dangerous. The longer they can keep you engaged, the higher the chance you'll eventually lose control. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in the first minute, but eventually, fatigue arrives, emotion builds, patience cracks, and suddenly the composed man starts explaining too much. The calm man starts defending himself. The disciplined man starts chasing the final word, and the trap closes. Have you ever noticed how some people always need the conversation to continue? They send one more message, make one more accusation, throw one more insult, or ask one more question. Throw one more insult, or ask one more question, not because they're seeking truth, but because they're seeking emotional access. They're looking for a crack in your armor, one reaction, one mistake, one emotional opening. And if they get it, they leave feeling powerful. This is why the strongest move is often the simplest. End it calmly, cleanly, completely. Not because you're defeated, but because you've already said everything worth saying. One of the hardest lessons a man learns is that not every battle is won through persuasion. Some battles are won through conclusion. The ability to stop, the ability to disengage, and the ability to leave without needing everyone to agree with you. That is freedom. Imagine a man who states his position clearly, sets his boundary, listens, responds, then says, "I've made my decision," and leaves. No anger, no speech, no dramatic exit, and no attempt to dominate the room, just certainty. Do you know why that's so powerful? Because certainty does not beg, certainty does not beg, certainty does not negotiate with people who are committed to misunderstanding it. And here's the truth most men don't want to hear. The need to have the last word is often disguised insecurity. The need to explain endlessly is often disguised insecurity. The need to be understood by everyone is often disguised insecurity. Powerful men understand something different. Not everyone needs to understand you. Not everyone needs to approve of you, and not everyone deserves continued access to your time. When the conversation has reached its natural end, let it die. Don't resurrect it. Don't text again because adrenaline is still running through your system. Don't replay the argument and send a follow-up message 3 hours later. Don't reopen doors that were already closed. A closed door is a position, while a half-open door is an invitation. Remember this: anyone can stay in the fight, anyone can keep talking, and anyone can keep reacting. But the man who can walk away without emotional residue, the man who can leave without chasing validation, the man who can end the interaction while remaining completely composed, that is the man who was never under their control in the first place. And that's the ultimate secret behind every tactic you've learned today. True power isn't forcing the interaction to continue. True power is knowing exactly when it ends. Intimidation was never the real enemy. The real enemy was your reaction to it. That's the part most men spend years misunderstanding. They think the loud voice is the threat, the aggressive stare, the disrespect, the manipulation, or the pressure. But if you've paid attention throughout this video, you've probably realized something unsettling. None of those things have power by themselves. Their power comes from what they make you do, the racing heartbeat, the need to defend yourself, the urge to explain, the urge to prove, and the urge to seek approval from people who have no intention of giving it. That's the trap. And if we're being honest, most men have lived inside that trap for years, maybe even decades. They don't realize how much of their life has been spent reacting to criticism, reacting to rejection, reacting to disrespect, reacting to women, reacting to other men, and reacting to people whose opinions shouldn't carry that much weight in the first place. And that's why they never feel fully in control, because a man who is constantly reacting is living in someone else's frame. Think about that. How many decisions have you made just to avoid someone's disapproval? How many times have you explained yourself to people who already decided not to understand you? How many nights have you replayed conversations in your head, rewriting arguments that ended hours ago? Most men will never answer those questions honestly, because the answer is uncomfortable. It exposes something: the hidden addiction to validation, the hidden fear of judgment, and the hidden need to be understood. And those weaknesses are exactly what intimidation feeds on. That's why the tactics you've learned today aren't really about dealing with intimidating people. They're about mastering yourself. The stillness, the questions, the pace, the space, the detachment, the calibrated agreement, the silent exit. None of these are techniques for controlling others. They're techniques for preventing others from controlling you. There's a difference, a massive difference. Because the strongest man in the room is rarely the loudest, rarely the most aggressive, rarely the one demanding attention. In fact, if you study powerful people closely, you'll notice something strange. Many of them seem almost boring under pressure. Their emotions stay contained, their movements stay measured, their responses stay deliberate. While everyone else is getting pulled into chaos, they remain untouched by it. And that's what unsettles people. Not dominance, not aggression, not intimidation. Composure, because composure cannot be manipulated easily. The man who remains centered becomes unpredictable. The man who remains centered becomes difficult to pressure. The man who remains centered becomes difficult to own. The truth is, the next time someone tries to intimidate you, you don't need to defeat them. You don't need to outtalk them. You don't need to embarrass them. You don't need to prove you're stronger. Let them talk. Let them posture. Let them perform. Let them spend energy chasing reactions that never arrive. Because eventually something fascinating happens. The louder they become, the calmer you look. The harder they push, the more exposed they become. The more desperately they seek control, the more obvious their need for it becomes. And that's when the illusion breaks. That's when you realize something most people never discover. Real power isn't forcing your presence onto other people. Real power is remaining yourself when someone is trying to take that away. If this video gave you a new way of seeing pressure, conflict, and psychological control, make sure you support the channel. Like this video, subscribe, and share it with a man who needs to hear it. Because in a world full of people trying to control your reactions, your attention, your emotions, and your decisions, the rarest form of strength is self-command. And the man who masters self-command becomes something intimidation can never touch. Not stronger, not louder, not more aggressive, untouchable.